Hello everybody, I'm Alexy Khrabrov, the organizer of SF Scala, and here we are on location at Chartboost, where we have the most functional programming heavy talk of the year about Cleasley arrows, and here with us we have Ryan Delucci. I would pronounce it Delucci, but Ryan will pronounce it how it should be pronounced,
it's
from
Delucci, yeah.
Verizon. Welcome Ryan.
Hello.
It's great to have you. So, maybe we'll start from the beginning. You are one of the longest serving veterans of SF Scala. You were at all SF Scala conferences and a lot of meetups. So can you tell us why Scala? How did you get interested in Scala, and what was your evolution in Scala culture?
So for me, I would say, so I've actually worked in the industry developing in Java since about 2004. Mm-hmm. So that's a good amount of time as I worked in Java. That I'd say like reach around 2010. I started taking a look at reading some tutorials on Scala, talking with some folks that know about Scala, and was actually encouraged by a number of people to say, hey, you gotta take a closer look at this language. And I would say it was around late 2012 that I started really to get interested. And it was, what started it was I actually started attending some SF Scala meetups. And it was actually quite funny how I remember looking at some code that was being discussed. I believe it was a talk on Akka. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking at the code and thinking, wow, I totally do not get this, but it looks really awesome. And I spent a lot of time studying it, and I actually worked on a project that ended up being open sourced. That involves doing some mapping, processing of map data, OpenStreetMaps, and that was sort of like a proof of concept for me to sort of decide, okay, do I want to invest more time in this? Is this a language for me? And after working on that, it was a complete hands down yes. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was just obvious. I mean, looking at all the features in the language, it seems overwhelming to a lot of beginners. They say, okay, why are there 3 different kinds of classes? Case mm-hmm. classes, yes. Objects classes. Yes. Why are all these different traits as well? Why do they have all these different elements? But as you start working in the language, you see how everything fits together in this very, yes, complex, but sort of very intricate fashion that it's all natural. The features are very useful. And I think that's what really got me interested in the language. And from there, I'd say after working on the open source project, I joined Netflix, and I was there for about a year and a half roughly. Mm-hmm. And that's when it was sort of my first actual role working in Scala. Mm-hmm. And I think that was there where I was actually introduced to some more functional concepts. And I have to give a shout out to Brendan McAdams as he opened my eyes to some really interesting bits there in Scala Z.
He's the father of the Cinnabon name for the Scala Z operator.
Yeah, which you'll see in my talk tonight, by the way. And so he kind of opened my eyes to this, and I started to realize, oh, wait a minute, this is the exact kind of library that I've been actually looking for without even realizing it. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, you hear a lot of folks that talk about Scala Z as this sort of mad scientist, mathy. I mean, it's applied math, yes, but they see this sort of crazy library that's just got all these funky operators. Doesn't make any sense. But when you actually sit down and look at the different pieces and try applying the different category theory concepts and use them as patterns, if you will, and apply them in the correct way, you start to everything just fits together, and you start to realize that you can build much more complex and more sophisticated software components using these principles.
Cool. So this is amazing, right? I think this is kind of something which every kind of functional programmer can aspire to. You basically were like a hardcore Java guy. You saw Scala. You taught yourself Scala, mm-hmm. and you got a job at Netflix, and now you're at Verizon.
I'm at Verizon, yeah, which is little background on that. So I'm actually on the what was referred to as the OnQ team when it was started at Intel. Actually, originally it was Intel Media, and then it was sort of referred to as OnQ. And then Verizon actually acquired the team there, and so now we're all under Verizon. I actually joined right after. It was a bit after that they were purchased. So that's where I've been, and I've been working on some amazing stuff there. It's just been exciting.
This is one of the, I would say, highest concentration of FP luminaries in Scala anywhere, right? So Lunar is there, and Tim Perez is there, and Stu Connor is there. And so we had a meetup there with Martin Dursky around Scala Days in spring, and it was awesome community. So I'm really curious, how do you find kind of, maybe you can talk a little bit, you were at Netflix, which is, has famous culture, but not famous for Scala specifically, famous kind of, example of interesting engineering culture, and now you're at Verizon. So what can you tell about how can you kind of characterize a good Scala culture, right? We know a lot of Scala people are not on Netflix anymore, and a lot of them are in Verizon. So I would hypothesize that there are more conducive cultures and less conducive culture. Can you talk a little bit about like what's good about this group in Verizon? What makes it possible to collect so much talent in one place?
I agree 100% with everything you say, and I would say what really makes the culture for our team, for the I'll keep referring as OnQ because we kind of see each other as like as a single team. I would say that what really struck me is that just a wide range of folks that we have a range of people that are newly grads. And also going up to the other end of the spectrum, very experienced, even like folks who literally wrote the book on functional programming in Scala.
That's right.
I think that creates a very, very special dynamic. And what that does, that means that everybody's learning, everybody's teaching each other new ideas, new concepts. And this sort of culture of learning, which is very strong on my team, is I think it's very important, and I think having that wide range just makes it really nobody feels feels like, oh, can I ask this a stupid question? That's never an issue, and I would say that combined with the fact that we're really good with like pull requests, code reviews, and I would say that those are elements that really just make it a great conducive culture to learning Scala. And as you say, there's a number of folks there that have that have been working in functional programming for a long time. They understand pure FP. They totally get referential transparency, and I would say having folks that you have the fact that we have those people working on in main parts of the architecture and spearheading the open source that we have, awesome, which I invite people to take a look at. It's on GitHub, OnQ open source. They're leading the way of the vision for the technical vision for the company, and it's quite exciting.
Cool. So you mentioned diversity of skills. You have junior guys, you have obviously famous senior guys. How do you see junior guys teaching Scala? How do you make kind of idiomatic Scala programmers out of newbies? What do you see in this process? What works really to kind of teach new guys Scala?
It's about having it ingrained in people's ways of thinking, and that we talked about culture before. Having that in the culture is important. The idea of wanting to do things the right way. Realizing that this type of work we're doing is really quite deep, and you can't simply go towards the obvious solution of solving a problem, even the second or even the third most obvious. You have to foster this sort of culture of experimentation where people learn iteratively, and I think code reviews actually help a lot with that. So there's not this sort of wild, wild west where people just commit stuff on top of each other without having other folks peer review it. I think especially when you're talking about a language like Scala, where folks are coming up to speed on the language, and once again, people are teaching each other new tricks and techniques. I think it's really, I think it really helps. That's a real big part of it. Just having peer review, having the barriers down, where it's like, okay, there's all these negative comments on my code, but it's okay. These folks are trying to help me out, and that's how it is. It's really quite positive.
Cool. And you mentioned also open source, and of course, a lot of folks know about CATS, which is the FP library, which is kind of a successor or complement or an analog to Scala Z with kind of focus on community, right? And so I wonder, because it's a high-profile library, you guys are obviously getting a lot of action from outside developers. So I wonder, and you put out some other products like configuration library. So I wonder, how does this dynamic work? Because you're getting a lot of pull requests from outside developers. How does it affect the group itself? How does it help? Obviously, yes, you need to invest some time in the community, but it probably pays with patches directly and kind of some communication directly. Can you talk a little bit about this dynamic of open source, being authors of open source, which is widely used?
Yeah, so we've had a lot of interest in the remotely library, the knobs library, which is a configuration library you're talking about, and also the funnel library, which has just recently been released, some monitoring. And these are pieces that at varying degrees we're using internally ourselves. And the beauty of open source is it allows the community to sort of see the interesting work that we're doing, and they realize, wow, okay, these guys mean business, and people really, they get really interested, and it's a great recruiting tool. On top of that, having this code in the community, you have folks that look at the code with fresh pair of eyes, or actually more than a pair. You have a lot of people looking at it, lots of pairs of eyes.
At least of pairs.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so you have a lot of people with a fresh look at the code, and they might see, wait a minute, we should do this, and then you get the pull requests coming in, and that's how we actually improve. We have this sort of ecosystem that's forming around the product, and it increases adoption. It's sort of like the analogy that they use where you put more water in the lake and all the boats rise kind of situation.
Does it kind of create more fun for the group itself, like when you see people receiving pull requests? Like
it is. It's great, yeah, and it's great to see. And I see through the email comments whizzing by. There, folks are doing the pull requests and all the commenting back and forth. And yeah, that definitely. It's part of connecting with the community, and also the work we do. We know that okay, we have an impact within the company, but also the community at large.
That's great. So I would say I would wrap up with kind of the question for this end of the year. Everybody's making forecasts, right? You guys are growing. On Vidya did a great talk at Scala by the Bay about kind of that language matters for engineering culture. Where she kind of explained how Scala strategy really panned out for NQ. So how do you see the next year evolving? How do you see Scala kind of playing out at NQ and Verizon in general?
We've totally invested in the Scala, so we're continuing with that. We're constantly looking for great folks to add to our team. I would say that for me, I see an expanding role of functional programming, pure functional programming in particular, being played in the industry. I really do see that it's something that as more people catch on to how powerful it is and how it just completely opens doors, opportunities of just building software more reliably and greater speed. I think it's going to reach a point where it's going to become the standard in the industry down the road. It may take some time because the it's a steep learning curve, but it's one of those things. As more people grasp onto it, it's going to become not just an optional thing anymore.
Cool. And for you, you started speaking at SF Scala, and kind of you gave this talk, I think, at Scala Bay, and it's kind of obviously having fun doing this, and you have plans to present it next year, and just plan to speak next year. How do you see kind of join the community? How do you see this helping you and helping the community?
Well, I like I said, I started by attending meetups, and I went to 2 Scala by the Bays. Actually, I should say 3 if you count the Scala Symposium in the South Bay. Yep. So I've been to all 3 of those. I actually attended my first Scala Days, which was here in San Francisco this year. And I guess it just kind of seemed like a logical next step for me. And it really was sort of triggered by the fact that not only that I've really gotten deep into Scala, but I've started to realize just as I've spent more time with pure functional programming and Scala Z, that there's some really exciting stuff here. That I'm just bursting with this, and I have to I have to do some talks and just to show people how amazing how amazing this library is, category theory is, and of course cats as well, and yeah, so that's kind of my take on it.
All right. So we're looking forward to your talk, and wishing you a lot of luck and more talks in the coming year. Happy to connect with the OnQ community, and thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you.